Welcome back to Light the Fuse, the only and therefore most prestigious Mission Impossible podcast on the internet. This is Drew Taylor, once again joined by Charles Hood.
Hello. That was a much more mellow introduction.
Do you want a little more energy, or?
Oh no, I think it's fine.
Okay,
let's slow things down a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we're slowing things down in the podcast this week, aren't we?
Yeah.
This is a new format. We're doing extensive behind-the-scenes kind of episodes about the production of each entry in the franchise.
Production, pre-production, everything, casting, post-production.
Post-production.
This is just the making of.
The making of the missions. And we're going to start with Mission Impossible. Where else would we start?
Brian De Palma's, I'm going to say, masterpiece.
Yeah.
Whoa.
It would have been a real curveball if we had started off with, like, Ghost Protocol or something. But, we're not
Maybe another day.
Maybe we're going to do it, yeah. So let's just get into it. You ready to get into it?
Yeah.
We're gonna do this whole thing. So the earliest we saw about pre-production was October 25th, 1995, which is, a decade before the movie.
11 years before. Yeah.
Ed Feldman, who is a producer of Witness, talked about getting Peter Graves and the rest of the cast for a movie version of the show. And now there have been movies made of episodes kind
of the old show, the original show. Yeah.
Pieced together.
But it makes you wonder if he's talking about, this is 85 and the 80 show was in 88. Did it bring up the 80 show? Did it sort of, because they tried to get the cast together for a movie and then maybe it fizzled and they were like, oh, maybe we should do a TV show when the writer's strike happened, or how,
Yeah, well,
it makes you wonder, is they're going to assemble the old cast?
It's interesting because we are also watching the 80 show now, which you can hear that on our podcast as well, but 89 is not that far away from, when did the movie come out? 96? Yeah, so it's not like super long, there was still Mission Impossible stuff in the bloodstream, I think, more than people recognize.
Right. But it's funny, the wheels are in motion in 85 for this movie that finally comes out in 96.
Yeah.
The next bit of news that we came across is October 7th, 1991 in Variety. Paramount is in the early stages of trying to mount a big screen version of Mission Impossible. And then 2 years later, September 1993, in Us magazine, Sherry Lansing has been eager to get Tom Cruise in a film since the success of The Firm. She has sent him script after script, including the John McTiernan Western Bitter Root and the skydiving adventure Drop Zone. He passed on everything until Mission Impossible hit his desk. So now this is coming off of Mel Gibson starring in Maverick and Harrison Ford starring in The Fugitive, both big TV adaptations for Warner Brothers, plus, of course, The Untouchables was a big hit for Kevin Costner in the 80s. So there's a lot to talk about here. I mean, this McTiernan Western that never happened.
Yeah.
Bitter Root, which I've read about before.
We should ask him about that.
Yeah.
And Drop Zone was eventually made with Wesley Snipes.
Yeah. So, back in 93, so it's 3 years of putting this thing together with Tom Cruise to get the movie to come out. And you can see the progression from 91 to 93. It took 2 years to get Tom Cruise interested,
But, of course, there are conflicting stories with any bit of research, because we found a Box Office Magazine report in April 96 that made it sound like Cruise approached Sherry Lansing about who owned the rights to Mission. Cruise said he asked her before The Fugitive or any of the others came out, so it's kind of a he said, she said on who got this ball rolling. But Cruise said at the time, it's a big canvas and it lent itself to characters who use their wits to overcome situations. And I thought we'd get a nice ensemble cast together and have a lot of fun. And that's kind of interesting, too, because of how people always talk about how the Mission movies are a Tom Cruise show.
Right. But you always hear directors talk about how he's so willing to give other actors like the meaty roles, meaty dialogue. Like, he's not taking everything himself. Well, I forget which director was talking about this, but I think it might have been Brad Bird. Or it might have even been McQuarrie, actually, on one of his Empire podcasts, was saying, if you start talking about some fun idea, it's not that he's saying, oh, I get to do that, no one else does. It's just that he gets excited and he goes, oh, I'll do that.
Right.
And he's sort of the first one to
jump in.
To sign up.
Yeah.
But he, even back then he's talking about having it'd be a good ensemble piece. And
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Cruise initially worked on the film's story with legendary director Sidney Pollack, who's uncredited in the final release. We really wish we had brought that up in our Unmade Missions episode, the idea of a Sidney Pollack Mission Impossible movie. So now let's just take a second to think about what a Mission Impossible movie from the director of 3 Days of the Condor and The Firm would look like.
Okay.
Shh. Just think.
But he didn't do Mission Impossible. He went off and did the very misguided Sabrina remake.
Yeah, I don't know what happened, but I guess they had worked together on the firm, and then it broke down, I guess, and Pollock moved on.
Yeah, we're not sure if Pollock hired writers or how far along he was, but apparently Cruise and Paula Wagner had hired William Hyuk and Gloria Katz, who wrote Temple of Doom and American Graffiti and Howard the Duck and all of these movies for George Lucas, and they took a shot at the script, but we have not found this script anywhere, we don't know anything about it.
No, I should look actually and see if I can find that original script, because they'd have that at the cinema library. I'll see if I can pull it, because it'd be very interesting to read. You'll see there's more info about it a little bit here. In 1994, according to Paramount's production notes, they were in the process of looking for a director when, by chance, Tom Cruise met Brian De Palma at a dinner at the house of a mutual friend. Cruise says he had always been a huge admirer of De Palma's. So on March 18th, 1994, Hollywood Reporter says Brian De Palma is in negotiations to direct.
That's crazy. Just a dinner.
Yeah.
That's all it took. So by June 5th, De Palma is already asking for rewrites. There's talk of Jay Cox coming on board, and Jay Cox, of course, was a former critic who went on to script Age of Innocence and Gangs of New York and worked on Strange Days. They also say that the original draft, the Hyuk and Katz draft, was a bad TV script.
Yeah, it says sources say that.
Yeah. Insanely, this LA Times article from 1994 actually spoils the plot that all the team members are killed at the beginning, and I wonder if this is when they wanted the original actors to come back.
Right.
Because that was what the gag was supposed to be, that all the team from the original show is coming back to die. I guess.
When I next time I go to the library, I'm going to see if I can pull that script and see if I can find out what the character names are and if the character names are from the old show.
Right.
But it's crazy that element was in the plot from the beginning.
Yeah.
So then, July 12th, in Variety, it's announced that David Koepp is getting $1 million to rewrite the script. At this point, it's expected to be a summer 1995 release. Koepp wrote Jurassic Park, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, Carlito's Way, Panic Room, Spielberg's War of the Worlds. Then, on October 31st, this is still 1994, according to Hollywood Reporter, Paramount source says David Koepp has turned in his draft and has, quote, nailed it. Koepp was helped by extensive notes by Steven Zaillian, who backed out of the rewrite gig because of time considerations. Zaillian wrote Schindler's List, Moneyball, and David Fincher's Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. So that was, he's credited on the movie for story. That's, I guess, the extent of his involvement.
It's just crazy to think of all these people on it, including Robert Towne, who was brought on to write the script. And he, of course, wrote Chinatown, The Last Detail, Shampoo, one of the biggest script doctors in Hollywood, getting paid insane amounts of money to come in on scripts and just gussy it up.
Right, and as Patrick Willems mentioned on our interview with him, he also did Days of Thunder with Tom Cruise.
Yeah, for a while he was like the first McQuarrie.
Yes. He
would kind of bring him on to every project.
And before Cruise, Towne was kind of that figure for Warren Beatty.
Yes.
Which they talk about, I think, in Easy Rider's Raging Bulls.
Right.
I think, their relationship was very close.
So supposedly he came on because Koepp left to direct The Trigger Effect, which is a terrific little movie that he wrote and directed. But as De Palma says in the De Palma documentary, the great Noah Baumbach feature-length documentary on Brian De Palma, Towne and Koepp were used at the same time during production. And we can get into what they were contributing later, but Koepp had to return to help out during production. One of the things he was doing was trying to figure out the third act. But a couple of other tidbits about the script before we move on is that Towne and Cruise worked together fine-tuning the betrayal scene that we love, the kind of cross examination of what went down. Right,
where they're showing you the truth while Phelps is lying to Hunt. Yes,
which is a great De Palma moment.
Love that scene.
And Towne said he had to rewrite scenes sometimes even between takes during filming. So sounds like a very smooth production. But
but it sounds like, that's a tradition that goes to this day.
Yes.
McQuarrie talks about the productions of these movies as similar to that.
And everybody seemed to be having a lot of fun on the first movie, too. There was never any blow-ups or anything that we ever heard about.
Right. Yeah, and I just want to take this opportunity, now that we're talking about the script again, to say that I think it's not that complicated, this script. I know everybody talks about that.
Yeah.
But they just, they don't over-explain terms like knock and mole hunt. They don't hold the audience's hand and spoon-feed you the exposition. I think I've said this before, but I'd argue it's actually the best plot of any of the movies and the clearest. Also, there's just like a really amazing touches, like Krieger's knife is such a great reveal. You know, Cruise holds the bloody knife after Sarah is killed at the beginning. Then he blocks it from Jean Reno, and then Jean Reno drops the knife into the vault. Like, that knife is running through the whole thing, and then to have that moment at the end when Cruise puts it together, like, oh, that's his knife, and it's just like, it's such a smart plot device. And then also the use of the phrase "Good morning, Mr. Phelps" as the big gotcha moment on the train at the end. You know, that's so smart to bring back when Kittredge looks on his watch and the train at the end and goes, "Good morning, Mr. Phelps." Like, that's so great. Such a great moment. And something else I recently realized, it always bugged me that Phelps doesn't shoot Hunt at the end on the train. You know, like he like lets him go.
He constructs the plastic gun or whatever,
Yeah, but that's an obvious reason for that, because if you look when he's constructing the gun, he only has 2 bullets. Because it's like a makeshift gun in order to get past security. That's why he doesn't shoot Hunt. There's actually a concrete reason for it. So anyway, just...
Do you feel better now that you noticed that detail?
Yes, I do, actually, because that was one thing that bothered me when I watched the movie. But now, you know, revisiting the movie enough times, I see, like, oh, they had an explanation for that.
Yeah. This will not surprise anyone who knows De Palma, but he was sort of constructing these set pieces, and then people had to write around them, which is another tradition that has continued throughout the franchise.
Right.
But yeah, he talks about this a little bit more in the documentary. But it's just you can tell that he's just playing with all of his toys, and it pays off beautifully. It's one of the most interesting movies he did. So, do you have any other thoughts about pre-pro?
No, but I will. Now that you're talking about De Palma, we'll like to divert our conversation to talk a little bit about De Palma and some how people say this movie isn't a De Palma movie. Right. And I think we have some quotes and things from people to pinpoint how much this is really a Brian De Palma movie. So here's a quote from De Palma where he says, "There's a theme of impotence in my films. In Casualties of War and Blowout, somebody witnesses horrific events he can do nothing about. The first sequence in Mission, when Hunt sees what's happening to his team, takes this idea to the nth degree." This is a quote from May 96 in Newsweek magazine.
Wow. I love that.
It's a really cool way. It's another just thing pointing out how it's a very De Palma thing in there.
Yeah, and we found this great quote from Manola Dargis, who reviewed the film for LA Weekly. Obviously, now she is a New York Times film critic, and wrote that De Palma clearly grooves on the parallels between himself and Ethan, 2 professionals struggling against the machine. And that's from the May 24th, 1996 review in the LA Weekly. And I never thought about those parallels. Did you ever think about that?
No, I mean,
I also don't think that Ethan is that much against the system, but maybe that's in the hindsight of 6 movies. And
yeah, I mean, when you watch that first movie, it is really like him struggling against the IMF, asserting his will over Kittredge.
Right. Yeah.
Also, somebody brought this up on Twitter, and I wanted to credit him. Ryan Holt, who is @_the goodbye look on Twitter, had a great bit of analysis that we came across and wanted to share. He says, "Well, Mission Impossible does embed one key De Palma idea, cinema as both manipulator and revealer. Phelps creates a false narrative using the footage from the camera glasses. Hunt rewrites that narrative using the same camera glasses." I thought that was really neat.
That's interesting.
A cool thing to bring up.
And you can also see that carry over. His next movie was Snake Eyes, which is all about cameras picking up an assassination at a boxing match, which is interesting.
And the different perspectives of it from a different angle. Yeah.
That's interesting. So let's talk about the cast again. The original Mission TV stars Martin Landau and Peter Graves declined offers to appear in the film. Landau disapproved the fact that the film was all about action, which it isn't really all about action.
I think maybe for the time it felt like it was.
Maybe for old ass Martin Landau it did.
I love Martin Landau.
He's great.
Come on,
he's great.
Take it easy. Take it easy on Landau.
While the TV show was more of a mind game, while Graves was unhappy about the treatment of the Jim Phelps character. And that was, I think, a very contentious element even when the movie was released. Right?
Yes. Yeah. There are some quotes upcoming that we'll get to. In December 8th, 1994, Variety reports that Emmanuel Bert, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name, but I think it's Emmanuel Bert, the lead, the female lead in the Mission Impossible movie, is testing in Paris with Tom Cruise. But it also says so are Juliette Binoche and the actress from La Femme Nikita, the Luc Besson movie, and I don't want to mispronounce her name. Anne, do you know what it is? Anne Pariad?
Pariad, yeah.
I'm not sure how to pronounce it exactly, but interesting to hear that Juliette Binoche and the star of La Femme Nikita were considered for this role.
I love that February 10th, Variety reports Henry Cerny is cast as Kittredge. The studio talked to Gene Hackman and John Malkovich. about tackling the role, but Cerny landed it. That's really interesting to think that they could have had a big star.
Yeah, Hackman or John Malkovich as Kittredge.
I mean, it's a pretty thankless role, and I
But
love
it's also,
what he does with it.
they kind of make you think he's the bad guy.
Yeah, that's true.
So, it would sort of make sense to stunt cast somebody big.
Yeah.
I look at Hopkins in the second movie.
Yeah.
That's a real thankless
Yeah,
role.
and McQuarrie has brought up the fact that the John Lark surrogate, the guy who's killed in the bathroom, was going to be a big star at one point. They were doing a stunt cast it.
Oh.
Yeah. They talked about Fassbender and somebody like that. So you would think that it was really him and that he would be in more of the movie. And then when he gets killed, that was a big reveal.
That's interesting.
So it has carried through.
But the bathroom fight would not have been nearly as good.
That's
Because
what
guy's a trained fighter.
No, that's what they
trained
said.
stunt
Yeah,
fighter.
that nobody could basically do what that was required of that scene.
Yeah. They cast Ving Rhames as Luther because he was the opposite of what a hacker normally looked like at the time. And according to Paramount's production notes, Rhames created a whole backstory for Luther that I've never heard before. Ving Rhames says, quote, "He's a guy who was married and actually still is, still wears his wedding ring, but his work in the IMF destroyed his marriage and his family life. Because he's been disavowed, he's had to keep underground." That is a really interesting thing.
That's weird.
Well, I don't know. It adds layers to what he's talking about in MI3
Yeah.
when he says you can't be married in this profession.
Yeah. Well, I think if you want to look at the typical nerd computer hacker from around this time, GoldenEye, Alan Cumming, that
Right.
was kind of the
Typical
sweaty white guy with
in glasses.
giant glasses. Yeah. and subverting archetypes and stereotypes. The Max was written by a man.
The arms dealer,
Yeah.
Max, yeah.
And then Vanessa Redgrave. I mean, why would you not cast Vanessa Redgrave in that
I know.
part?
Yeah, I love that they cast her in that part.
Yeah.
And then this was mind-blowing to us, but I'm going to mispronounce the name again, but Andreas Wisniewski, who plays Max's henchman, and he cameos in Ghost Protocol, as
Yes.
we've talked about. It's the guy with the long blonde hair who's, comes back. He was actually Tony in Die Hard. So
He's the guy with the glasses?
Yeah, he's the brother of Carl, who gets his neck, broken when he's fighting with John McClane, and they go down the stairs, and he, breaks his neck, and he's the one who ends up with the sweatshirt. Now I have a machine gun, ho ho ho. But that guy is the same as the henchman who's in the first Mission Impossible and in Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. I had no idea. Die Hard is my favorite movie, and I had no idea this is the same guy.
That is mind blowing, and I love his sweatsuit in Die Hard.
Yeah.
If only he had worn that in Mission Impossible. So let's get down to some brass tacks here, okay?
Okay.
$62 million production budget. There's a lot of numbers from that time, and it's shocking that it was not higher, but that was it. I mean,
I've seen around 70 also, but it seemed like most of the people were saying 62.
Which was probably pretty high for 1995, 96 money.
Right.
And it started.
I guess high, but not incredibly high.
I don't know.
A lot of people were commenting on how it was like done on a good budget, like they were able.
Oh, really?
They were They were.
Yeah, I wonder what other movies were costing at the time. Like, I don't know, the Independence Day and things like that. But the production started in Prague in March 1995 and in England in August, which is actually also surprisingly short shoot. I mean, maybe there weren't any. Like, I feel like the later movies have sort of been plagued by either having to regroup to work on the script or someone getting hurt. But doesn't that seem like a short amount of time?
As we'll get to, there is a report of reshoots that I never heard of before, and so we'll get to that in a bit.
And it was one of the first big budget Hollywood movies to shoot in Prague, where it makes use of the Charles Bridge, Liechtenstein Palace, and Old Town Square. And a lot of movies since have been shot in Prague. Hellboy and a bunch of The Saint, I believe, was shot there. Cinematographer Stephen Burham had to light 2 miles of bank on either side and 900 feet of the Charles Bridge in the night exterior Prague sequence, which is the opening sequence. And that's
not the opening, but
not the opening.
When all the team members get
Yes,
killed. It's that those night exteriors. Just when you watch them next time, keep that in mind and look at how much had to be lit in the backgrounds of those shots. It's pretty remarkable.
That's crazy.
The embassy that's seen in the film that we've talked about, which is all staircase, is actually the Natural History Museum in Prague. And there's so many stairs there. I still don't know how it's a museum. Maybe it's a stair museum. But that
History is great stairs.
but it also that location doubles as the lobby of the Venetian Hotel in another spy movie, Casino Royale.
Ooh. This is making me want to do go to Prague, record an episode in Prague. Yeah.
Oh, let's do it.
Yeah.
I'm all in.
Yeah, for the aquarium restaurant scene, and we're going to put up some photos of this on social media because Charles found some amazing photos of this. They filmed it as the final shot of Cruise running away from the city with a bunch of water spilling on the ground, and most of the sequence was shot in Pinewood in London, which we know as that's the James Bond stage, right? Or
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
where they
Yeah. That was, and there was just that one shot in Prague, I think, of him
running.
maybe him walking up
that
too.
reverse
I think
shot. Okay.
it might be him walking up, but it's also him running away at the end.
Right.
And other than that, it's all in Pinewood.
So the giant aquarium that explodes unleashed 16 tons of water onto Pinewood, and Cruise and De Palma were so nervous about the scene that it was rehearsed more than any other scene in the film, in part because Cruise was doing the stunt himself, and it was all Cruise's idea, which I guess this is sort of the beginning of him doing all of his own stunts. And
yeah, it's interesting because I came across some bit of research somewhere where it said De Palma had to convince Cruise because the stunt man, it didn't look convincing enough.
Yeah.
And he said, Cruise, why don't you do it? So you kind of get into these back and forth of who came up with what, but yeah. Supposedly Cruise came up with the idea for that.
You think that
maybe it was just his idea for the aquarium scene, maybe not for doing the stunt.
Did they just erase that blue mat that he was running on? Is that what did you take away from those behind the scenes photos? Because he's running on that mat.
I think the mat at the bottom is framed out.
Okay.
From that angle.
Okay.
And then the shot of him running off into Prague is literally just them dumping water and dead fish, or prop dead fish onto the ground and him just running.
Yeah, which is a great kind of low budget fix for that.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like they just dumped some water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of effects and things, as we've talked about before on this show, Rob Bottin, who did incredible work on John Carpenter's The Thing and Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop and Total Recall and David Fincher's Seven and Fight Club, he did the makeup for this movie, and he created the famous mask reveal, which has, become, I would say, iconic for this series.
Yeah.
And it's cool. Getting Rob Bottin signed on to do that, I think, was really a smart choice.
And then, of course, there's the internet scene, which is made fun of on Twitter a lot. We've made fun of it, certainly.
Yes.
But according to the
Hunt going on the forums and contacting Max.
So in the production notes, it says the producers applied for permission and license to use the Netscape interface, which was an early 90s browser like Prodigy, which they modified to suit their purposes when an actor had access to the internet. But apparently, and here's a nice little aside, that the Netscape was defeated in the first browser war in the late 90s by Internet Explorer, which we all used to use. And the code was passed down and ended up being part of Firefox, which also something nobody uses anymore, but was very popular for a time.
I don't know if I was really on the internet in 96. I might have been on AOL. I don't think I was on AOL yet.
No.
So, people make fun of the movie, but they swear by the accuracy of Netscape.
Yeah.
I never used Netscape. Maybe that's just what Netscape looks like,
yeah.
and it's just a terrible system.
Yeah.
But everybody makes fun of that scene, and I just wanted to make sure we all got into the nitty-gritty of the research there. So then also let's talk about the Langley sequence. It was obviously influenced by Jules Dassin's Top Copy, where a thief dangles from the ceiling trying to steal a valuable dagger. Dassin's other big movie, Rafifi, should also probably be mentioned.
Yes.
Dassin sort of created the template for how to do a heist movie. And it's obviously these Mission Impossible, the old show, and the movies are all just kind of heist movies in a way. The all-white look of the vault in Langley was influenced by Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey. This is a good time to bring up production designer Norman Reynolds. He also did Empire Strikes Back and Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is pretty cool. He also did Alien 3, which I love, and regardless of your thoughts on the movie, the look of Alien 3 is absolutely gorgeous. So we just never had talked about Norman Reynolds on this show before, but to have him come and do the production design for this first movie is pretty amazing. And while they were shooting the Langley sequence, Tom Cruise is dangling from the ceiling, and he kept hitting his head on the floor because he was off balance. Cruise had this to say to Newsweek, quote, "I told them to give me some of those English pound coins, and I put them in my shoes. So we did, and I balanced myself that way just off the floor. It felt like an hour. It was probably 3 seconds. Then Brian said, 'cut,' and gave me a hug." That was from Newsweek in May of 96.
And kind of clearing up a misconception because we always said quarters, but it's not quarters.
Yeah, I
it's
always heard-
pound.
yeah.
So for the climax, Clues was initially against integrating the helicopter into the train sequence because he thought it would be too unrealistic. But De Palma argued that the movie needed an overtop ending and ultimately got his way. And you can hear more about this on in the documentary too, the kind of back and forth between
Right.
Town.
He wanted a big. De Palma wanted a big finish.
Yeah, De Palma and Kep, I think, wanted the helicopter to get in that tunnel, and Town had conceived of this ending where they just pull off masks and they're in the train car.
They talk about it.
Yeah. So they said, De Palma used some reverse psychology. Both ideas are now in the movie, so everybody kind of got what they wanted. But the train sequence took 6 weeks to shoot at Pinewood. Live action elements with Cruise and Voight were filmed against a blue screen on a stationary full-scale locomotive set. That's from the Hollywood Reporter. And wind machines blew gusts up to 140 miles per hour into Cruise and Voight's faces on top of the train.
Wow.
Which kind of, I guess, got him ready for the Rogue Nation cold open.
Oh, yeah.
Too, yeah. They had tried jet engines and various kinds of fans, but nothing was giving them the right authentic look they wanted until they got a skydiving simulator. It was the only one of its kind in Europe. And now you can go and do that at City Walk, sort of. That
Is it 140
chamber.
miles an hour?
It's not 140 miles an hour.
ILM visual effects supervisor John Knoll and DP Steve Burham animated the lights for them shooting on top of the train. They calculated that the train moved 8 feet per frame at 160 miles per hour, so they set up 10 lightning strikes strobe units 8 feet apart and synchronized them to the camera so they'd fire in sequence, 1 per frame. Which is just like
Wow.
this is like something that Todd Vaziri, who we're hoping to have on the show later on, he's a visual effects supervisor. He talked about how painstakingly they shot the top of the train for blue screen, and how blue screen can look amazing if you put in the effort, and they did on this movie clearly. Landscape background plates were shot in Scotland. For the helicopter explosion, Knoll swapped the CG helicopter for a 1/8 scale high-speed miniature that was shot at 120 frames per second. To match the CG train's virtual speed, Knoll's team used the gigantic electric motor to propel the chopper model through a 120-foot-long channel miniature at 50 miles per hour.
Wow.
That's all according to Hollywood Reporter in May of '96.
I remember seeing pictures of that model and it just being like the coolest thing.
Yeah. There's a picture that we found recently of the model of the helicopter, and we'll post that too.
It's a huge, like you say model, but it's a huge, I mean, it's the size of a human's midsection. It's giant.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Cruise had a good story about De Palma being quite a guerrilla New York filmmaker towards the end of the shoot. Cruise said, "I don't know if I should be telling this story, but we didn't have permits for what we had to finish. We're working on the last scenes of the picture, and we came up with this idea to have it in this restaurant in London where it takes weeks to get permits. Brian just said, look, let's do it. We'll be out before they come to get us. This big action movie, and it's like he's back in film school." And that's from Box Office Magazine. What sequence do we think that is? Is it the Phelps?
Is it the betrayal scene?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a restaurant in London. It couldn't have been the aquarium because that was a set in Pinewood.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would think it maybe must have been... That's in a train station, right? Or is it maybe it's not? Maybe they didn't shoot at the restaurant in the train station. I don't know, but that's really interesting to think about.
Yeah.
January 12th, 1996, according to the Times London, there are reshoots at Pinewood with Cruise and a very pregnant Emmanuelle Bert. So this is months later, and just, 5 months before the release of the movie, they're doing reshoots with Emmanuelle Bert, who's pregnant. So this is the first and only time I've ever seen a reference to reshoots being done. I'm not sure what they're about, or I don't know.
Usually you can tell when there's, a pregnant woman. I don't remember his hair changing. I guess
it must have been close-ups and things. They were fixing some lines of dialogue, maybe. I mean, I'd have to watch the movie again to see when they're shooting her in tighter close-ups.
Yeah, I wonder if it was the cold open. Because that is something completely divorced from anything else in the movie.
Yeah, because there's been a report before where De Palma, I think actually we'll get into it later, but De Palma says something about how there was a different sequence at the beginning that didn't test well, that set up the love triangle more. So I wonder, if they had a love triangle sequence that they replaced with this. But
yeah, you always have to look at what would be the easiest thing to kind of swap out.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think maybe we should call it a day and return to this and come.
Yeah, we're gonna come back. We're gonna do it in the second part. So
Sure.
For Charles Hood, this is Drew Taylor. But thanks for listening.
Thanks again for listening, everyone, and before we go, another mission, should you choose to accept it. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. And remember that you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LightTheFusePod, and email us questions or comments at lightthefusepodcasts@gmail.com. If you'd like to watch the original Mission Impossible television show, all 7 seasons are currently available to stream on Amazon Prime. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.